It was a picture-perfect Sunday afternoon in Liberty Park, where spring had painted the suburban Washington landscape in vibrant shades of renewal. Cherry blossoms dotted the winding paths with delicate pink petals, while ancient oak trees provided welcome patches of shade across the freshly manicured lawn. The air hummed with the familiar symphony of weekend life, children's laughter from the playground mixing with the gentle strumming of a college student's guitar, while the aroma of grilled hot dogs wafted over from the picnic area. Among the weekend crowd, Mike Thompson, a distinguished-looking man in his early 50s, sat on his usual bench near the central fountain. His silver-streaked hair and military bearing set him apart, though he made no effort to draw attention to himself. His weathered hands, bearing the subtle marks of years of service, held a well-worn copy of Band of Brothers, a book he had read countless times since his return from Afghanistan. The red MAGA hat sat comfortably on his head, a gift from his son who served in the Marines, more a symbol of family connection than political statement to Mike. The park had always been Mike's Sunday sanctuary, a place where he could find peace in the pages of his books while staying connected to the community he had sworn to protect. As police chief, he believed in being visible and accessible to his community, though few of the weekend park-goers recognized him out of uniform. He occasionally looked up from his reading to nod at passing joggers or smile at playing children, his quiet presence adding to the park's sense of security. Nearby, young families spread checkered blankets across the grass, unpacking elaborate picnic spreads while toddlers wobbled around on unsteady legs. A group of teenagers practiced yoga on rainbow-colored mats, their peaceful poses a stark contrast to the energetic basketball game on the nearby court. Several elderly couples walked arm in arm along the flower-lined paths, stopping occasionally to rest on benches and feed the bold squirrels that called the park home. The morning crowd had begun to thin as the afternoon sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the lawn. The gentle spring breeze carried fragments of conversation, discussions about weekend plans, friendly debates about local sports teams, and the occasional burst of laughter from the playground where parents pushed their children on swings. It was the kind of day that reminded Mike why he had chosen to dedicate his life to serving this community, first as a Navy SEAL and now as its chief of police. As he turned another page in his book, Mike's thoughts drifted to his own children, now grown and serving their country just as he had. His son James, the one who had given him the MAGA hat, was currently deployed overseas. The hat had become his way of feeling connected to his boy, though he knew it sometimes drew curious glances in this predominantly liberal suburb of Washington. Still, Mike believed in the power of peaceful coexistence, something his years of service had taught him was both precious and possible. The park's atmosphere shifted subtly as the afternoon crowd began to arrive. Young professionals with their designer dogs mixed with families heading home from church services, creating a diverse tapestry of community life. Among them, Jennifer Martinez, owner of the trendy Mindful Moments yoga studio downtown, had just finished her morning meditation session and was walking her perfectly groomed standard poodle, Romeo. Her carefully curated Instagram aesthetic, all clean lines and positive vibes, contrasted sharply with the unfiltered reality of the park's natural chaos. Mike remained absorbed in his book, unaware that his peaceful afternoon was about to be disrupted. The red hat on his head, which to him represented nothing more than a father's love for his son, was about to become the catalyst for a confrontation that would soon explode across social media and challenge the community's understanding of judgment, respect, and the complex nature of personal assumptions. The spring air, which had been filled with the sounds of weekend leisure, began to carry an undercurrent of tension as Jennifer's gaze fixed upon Mike's hat. Her grip on Romeo's designer leash tightened, her yoga-trained breathing becoming slightly irregular as she processed what she saw as an unwelcome intrusion into her cultivated safe space. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal far more about the observers than the observed and challenge long-held assumptions about appearance, authority, and the true meaning of community service. Little did anyone in Liberty Park know that this serene Sunday afternoon was about to become a viral moment that would force them all to confront their own biases and assumptions. The pieces were in place: a decorated veteran turned police chief quietly reading his book, an influencer yoga instructor with a carefully curated worldview, and a red hat that meant drastically different things to each of them. The only question was who would make the first move in this modern parable about judgment and redemption. Jennifer Martinez prided herself on being a pillar of progressive values in the community. Her Mindful Moments Yoga Studio's Instagram account, with its carefully curated feed of inspirational quotes and mindfulness tips, had become a digital sanctuary for over 15,000 followers. Today, however, her carefully cultivated inner peace was being tested by what she saw as a blatant symbol of division in her cherished public space. The sight of the red MAGA hat had sent a jolt through her yoga-toned body, disrupting the sense of serenity she'd achieved during her morning meditation session. Romeo, her purebred standard poodle, rescued from a breeder who couldn't sell him due to a slightly crooked tail, sensed his owner's tension and sat obediently at her feet, his perfectly groomed coat gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Can you believe this?" she whispered to Romeo, her manicured fingers adjusting the crystal healing necklace at her throat. In our park, the word "our" carried the weight of her assumptions about who belonged in this progressive suburban enclave. Her weekly outdoor yoga sessions in this very park had become something of a local institution, attracting dozens of like-minded individuals who shared her vision of an inclusive community. Though her definition of inclusion, ironically, had its own carefully drawn boundaries. Jennifer's Instagram stories had often featured passionate speeches about creating safe spaces and promoting diversity, though her feed notably showcased a very specific type of diversity that matched her aesthetic preferences. The man on the bench, with his military bearing and red hat, didn't fit into her carefully curated vision of what Liberty Park should represent. She watched as a young family with two small children walked past Mike's bench, the parents subtly quickening their pace. Or had they? Jennifer realized she might have imagined this detail, projecting her own discomfort onto others. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to be done. Her social media followers would expect her to take a stand. Wasn't she always posting about being an ally and standing up against perceived injustice? Drawing herself up to her full height, enhanced by her designer yoga wear and sustainably sourced sandals, Jennifer felt the familiar surge of righteousness that came with confronting what she viewed as social infractions. Romeo's leash was wrapped tightly around her wrist, the organic cotton material digging into her skin as she gathered her courage. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying the practiced tone of someone used to commanding attention in a yoga studio. Mike looked up from his book, his weathered face neutral as he regarded her. The American flag pin on his casual jacket caught the sunlight, but Jennifer was too focused on the red hat to notice this detail. "This is a family park," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "That hat, it's not appropriate here. It makes people feel unsafe." She gestured vaguely around the park, as if speaking for everyone present, though most people seemed absorbed in their own activities, barely paying attention to either of them. Mike's response was measured, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had faced far more serious confrontations. "Ma'am, I'm just reading my book and enjoying the afternoon." He marked his place in Band of Brothers, with a weathered bookmark bearing a Navy SEAL emblem. Another detail Jennifer failed to notice in her growing agitation. His composure only served to frustrate Jennifer further. In her mind, he should have been defensive, argumentative. His calm demeanor somehow felt like a challenge to her assumptions. She pulled out her phone, her turquoise case decorated with crystals catching the sunlight. "I have over 15,000 followers who care about keeping this community safe," she declared, as if her social media presence granted her special authority. "I'm going to document this." Several nearby park-goers had begun to take notice of the confrontation. A group of teenagers paused their basketball game to watch, phones already out and recording. A couple of dog walkers slowed their pace, torn between curiosity and discomfort. The peaceful Sunday afternoon was transforming into an impromptu stage for a drama that would soon spiral far beyond Liberty Park's tree-lined boundaries. "You don't understand what that hat represents," Jennifer pressed on, her voice rising slightly. Romeo, sensing the tension, began to whimper softly. "This is a diverse community. We don't need this kind of energy here." She stumbled slightly over her words, frustrated by Mike's continued calm. Mike closed his book carefully, placing it on the bench beside him. His movements were deliberate, unhurried, bearing the kind of patience that comes from years of high-stakes situations. "Ma'am," he began again, his voice still steady, "I respect your right to your opinion, but I'm not breaking any laws or disturbing anyone. I'm simply sitting here reading." Jennifer's fingers flew across her phone screen, alternating between typing and filming. "I'm calling the authorities," she announced, her voice carrying across the now quieting park. "They need to know about this situation." The irony of her next actions would soon become apparent to everyone watching, but in that moment, Jennifer felt absolutely certain of her moral high ground. The crowd around them had grown larger, drawn by the spectacle of confrontation in their usually peaceful park. Phones were raised, recording the scene from multiple angles, though none of the onlookers yet realized they were documenting a moment that would soon go viral for reasons very different from what Jennifer imagined. As she dialed 911, her hands shaking slightly with adrenaline, Jennifer didn't notice the knowing looks exchanged between some of the older park regulars who recognized Mike despite his casual attire. She was too focused on what she perceived as her righteous mission, unaware that her actions were about to backfire in a way that would force her to fundamentally re-examine her assumptions about judgment, tolerance, and the true meaning of community. The spring breeze carried the sound of approaching sirens, and Mike Thompson, still seated calmly on his bench, allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. 25 years as a Navy SEAL and 5 years as Chief of Police had taught him that sometimes the best lessons come from letting situations play out naturally. He watched as Jennifer paced back and forth, her designer yoga wear catching the afternoon sun, Romeo trailing behind her with increasing anxiety, both of them unwitting participants in what was about to become a viral lesson in humility and prejudice. The distant wail of police sirens grew louder, cutting through the peaceful afternoon air of Liberty Park. Jennifer Martinez stood her ground, phone still raised, live streaming the entire confrontation to her Mindful Moments Instagram followers. The comment notifications were already pinging rapidly, her audience growing by the minute as they tuned in to what she had dubbed an urgent community safety situation. "The police are on their way," she announced triumphantly, her voice carrying the rehearsed cadence of her yoga instruction. "This is what standing up for our community looks like, everyone. Sometimes we have to be brave and confront uncomfortable situations." She turned to address her live stream audience, her practiced camera angle capturing both her concerned expression and Mike in the background. Mike Thompson remained seated, his posture relaxed but alert, a habit ingrained from decades of military and law enforcement service. His copy of Band of Brothers rested beside him, the worn pages marked with his son's deployment photo serving as a bookmark. The red MAGA hat, which had sparked this confrontation, sat unchanged on his head, a silent testament to his unwillingness to be intimidated. The crowd around them had swelled considerably. Young mothers with strollers stood whispering among themselves, their phones discreetly recording. A group of college students had paused their frisbee game, openly filming the scene while debating the politics of the situation in hushed tones. Even the elderly couple who regularly fed the park's squirrels had stopped to watch, the husband shaking his head slightly as he recognized their police chief in civilian clothes. "Look at how many people are uncomfortable," Jennifer continued, gesturing to the gathering crowd, interpreting their presence as support for her position. "This is exactly why we can't normalize symbols of hate in our public spaces." Her voice had taken on the passionate tone she usually reserved for her viral social media rants about social justice. A young man in the crowd, wearing a local university sweatshirt, called out, "Maybe we should just let people be? He's not bothering anyone." His comment earned him a few nods of agreement and several disapproving looks from Jennifer's regular yoga students who had gathered nearby. "Not bothering anyone?" Jennifer spun around, her designer yoga pants swishing with the movement. "Silence is violence. We can't just sit back and allow intimidation in our community spaces." Romeo, her poodle, had begun to cower behind her legs, clearly distressed by his owner's escalating emotions. The first police car pulled up to the park's entrance, its lights flashing but siren now silent. Jennifer's live stream numbers jumped as she narrated the arrival. "The authorities are here, everyone. This is how we create change, by taking action and holding people accountable." Mike's slight smile went unnoticed by Jennifer, though several of the older park regulars had begun to exchange knowing looks. A second police car arrived, and Jennifer's satisfaction was evident in her running commentary to her followers. 2 units responding, they clearly understand the seriousness of this situation. Officers Sarah Chun and James Rodriguez stepped out of the first vehicle, their expressions professional but their eyes showing immediate recognition of their chief. They approached the scene with measured steps, taking in the crowd, the phones recording from every angle, and their boss sitting calmly on his usual Sunday bench. "Ma'am," Officer Chin addressed Jennifer, her voice steady and professional. "We received a call about a disturbance in the park. Can you explain the situation?" Jennifer launched into her account, her words tumbling out with rehearsed indignation. "This man," she pointed accusingly at Mike, "is wearing a symbol of hate in our family park. He's creating an unsafe environment and refused to leave when I explained how his presence was affecting everyone. Officer Rodriguez glanced at Mike, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the absurdity of the situation. "Sir, have you been causing any disturbance today?" Mike shook his head, his voice carrying the same calm authority it did in morning briefings at the station. "No, officer. I was just reading my book and enjoying the afternoon until this lady approached me and demanded I remove my hat or leave the park." "He's being passive-aggressive," Jennifer interrupted, her phone still live-streaming every moment. "You don't understand. I have a platform with thousands of followers, and we regularly discuss the importance of maintaining safe spaces. This hat is a known trigger, and he's clearly trying to provoke a reaction." Officer Chen's body camera recorded everything as she turned back to Jennifer. "Ma'am, wearing a hat, any hat, is not illegal. Unless someone is engaging in threatening behavior or breaking the law, we can't remove them from a public space." The crowd had grown larger still, with people abandoning their picnic blankets and weekend activities to witness the unfolding drama. Some had begun to whisper among themselves, recognizing Mike from community events and local news coverage. The irony of the situation was becoming apparent to more and more onlookers, though Jennifer remained oblivious in her righteousness. "So you're just going to let him sit there?" Jennifer's voice rose an octave. "What about our community guidelines? What about creating inclusive spaces?" Her free hand gesticulated wildly, causing Romeo to bark anxiously. A third police car pulled up, and Detective Mark Thompson, no relation to Mike but a veteran officer, stepped out. He approached the scene, barely containing his amusement as he recognized the situation. The crowd parted to let him through, phones following his movement as he made his way to Officers Chun and Rodriguez. Jennifer's live-stream comments were flooding in now, her followers divided between supporting her stance and questioning her approach. She turned back to her phone, her voice taking on the tone of a documentary narrator. "This is what we're dealing with, everyone. Even the police seem to be dismissing our concerns about public safety and inclusive spaces." Mike finally stood up, his movement drawing all eyes and cameras to him. His 6 feet 2 inches frame, still military straight despite his years, commanded natural authority. The American flag pin on his jacket glinted in the sunlight, and for the first time, Jennifer noticed the Navy SEAL insignia on his book's bookmark. The moment of revelation was approaching, tension building in the air like the moments before a thunderstorm. Phones recorded from every angle as Detective Thompson cleared his throat, struggling to maintain his professional demeanor. The scene was set for a twist that would soon make this confrontation go viral across social media platforms, though for reasons entirely different from what Jennifer had imagined when she started her live stream. The peaceful Sunday afternoon in Liberty Park had transformed into an impromptu stage for a drama about assumptions, authority, and the sometimes painful process of confronting our own biases. The next few moments would not only change Jennifer's perspective, but would also provide a viral lesson in humility that would resonate far beyond their suburban community. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Liberty Park as the moment of truth approached. Detective Thompson exchanged a meaningful look with Officers Chun and Rodriguez before addressing Jennifer, who was still narrating every development to her growing live stream audience. "Ma'am," Detective Thompson began, his voice carrying the weight of 20 years on the force, "I believe there's something you should know about the gentleman you've reported." He paused, allowing the gravity of the moment to build. Jennifer's live stream comments were flooding in so fast now that they became an illegible blur. "This is Chief Michael Thompson," the detective continued, gesturing toward Mike, head of the Springfield Police Department and decorated Navy SEAL veteran. The words hung in the air like thunder after lightning, and the park fell into a stunning silence broken only by the soft whimper of Jennifer's poodle, Romeo. The color drained from Jennifer's face as the revelation sank in. Her phone, still live streaming, trembled in her manicured hands. The comments on her stream exploded with reactions, ranging from shocked emojis to expressions of secondhand embarrassment. Several viewers quickly clipped the moment, ensuring its immortality in the digital sphere. But the hat," Jennifer stammered, her carefully cultivated social media persona crumbling in real time. The irony of calling the police on their own chief was not lost on the gathered crowd, and a few muffled laughs broke the tension. Mike finally spoke, his voice carrying the same calm authority it did in press conferences and community meetings. "Ms. Martinez, I believe," he said, surprising her with his knowledge of her name. "Your yoga studio does excellent work with veterans' PTSD programs at the community center. I've approved several grants for it myself. This additional revelation hit Jennifer like a physical blow. Not only had she called the police on their chief, but she had also confronted someone who had actively supported her business's community outreach programs. Her face flushed deep red as she realized the full extent of her misjudgment. "The hat," Mike continued, removing it and holding it with evident care, "was a gift from my son James. He's currently deployed overseas with the Marines. It's not a political statement for me. It's a father's way of feeling connected to his child who's serving our country." The crowd had grown completely silent, phones still recording as the scene unfolded. Even the teenagers who had been snickering earlier sensed the gravity of the moment. Jennifer's live stream numbers had reached record heights, but for once, she seemed oblivious to her social media metrics. Officer Chun, maintaining her professional composure, addressed the situation officially. "Chief Thompson, would you like to press any charges for false reporting or harassment?" Mike shook his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "No, Officer Chun. I believe this has been a learning experience for everyone involved." He turned to address the crowd, naturally falling into his role as community leader. "This park is for everyone, regardless of their political beliefs, what they wear, or how they choose to spend their Sunday afternoons." Jennifer's perfectly curated world had been turned upside down. Her phone continued to record, capturing her own humiliation for her thousands of followers to witness. The comments were merciless. "Karen calls cops on cop. Chief of police pranks entitled influencer. When keeping it woke goes wrong. I didn't know," she managed to stammer, her voice barely above a whisper. Romeo, sensing his owner's distress, pressed against her legs supportively. "That's exactly the point, Ms. Martinez," Mike replied, his tone gentler now. "We often don't know the full story of the people we're quick to judge. Every person in this park, every person in our community, has their own story, their own reasons for the choices they make." The gathered crowd began to murmur in agreement. Several of Mike's regular morning coffee shop acquaintances were nodding appreciatively, while Jennifer's yoga students looked uncomfortably at their feet. The scene was being recorded from dozens of angles, each phone capturing what would soon become a viral moment of public education about prejudice and assumptions. Detective Thompson, barely concealing his amusement, spoke into his radio. "Dispatch, we can clear this call. Situation resolved." He then turned to Jennifer, who stood frozen in place, her carefully crafted image of social justice warrior crumbling around her. "Ma'am, making false police reports is a serious offense. The chief is being very generous here." Mike picked up his book from the bench, the worn copy of Band of Brothers, a silent testament to his own service history. "Ms. Martinez," he said, "if you're interested, we're having a community dialogue session next week at the station. We'll be discussing how to build genuine understanding across different viewpoints in our community. You and your followers would be welcome to attend." The invitation, delivered without a hint of sarcasm or retribution, seemed to finally break Jennifer's paralysis. Tears welled up in her perfectly mascared eyes as the full impact of her actions and their public documentation hit her. Her phone had stopped live streaming, the battery finally giving out, but she knew the damage was done. Her attempt to shame someone had backfired spectacularly, and the internet never forgets. As the crowd began to disperse, the afternoon sun painting the scene in warm hues, Mike placed his hat back on his head and prepared to leave. Before he did, he turned to Jennifer one last time. "The yoga session for veterans starts at 7 a.m. tomorrow, right? I might stop by, not as the chief, but as someone who believes in the healing power of community connection." The officers returned to their vehicles, event reports would be filed, and social media would soon explode with various versions of what had transpired in Liberty Park that Sunday afternoon. But for Jennifer Martinez, standing alone with her poodle as her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, the real story was just beginning. A story about humility, growth, and the dangers of rushing to judgment in an age where everyone's mistakes can become viral sensations. The park slowly returned to its usual Sunday rhythm, but something had shifted in the community's consciousness. A simple red hat had become the catalyst for a lesson about prejudice, assumption, and the complex nature of human understanding, a lesson that would soon reach far beyond the tree-lined boundaries of Liberty Park. By Monday morning, the Liberty Park incident had exploded across social media platforms with the force of a digital tsunami. Clips of Jennifer Martinez's ill-fated confrontation with Police Chief Mike Thompson had been edited, shared, and commented on countless times, spawning dozens of memes and trending hashtags. Hashtag Chief Calmness, #KarmaForKaren, and #LibertyParkLesson. Jennifer sat in her empty yoga studio, staring at her phone in disbelief as the numbers kept climbing. Her original live stream, cut short by her dying phone battery, had been viewed over 2 million times. The comment sections were flooded with reactions ranging from mockery to moral lectures about prejudice. Her carefully curated Instagram account, once a haven of inspirational quotes and perfectly posed yoga pictures, had become ground zero for a national conversation about snap judgments and social media activism gone wrong. Mindful Moments Yoga Studio, where we judge your hat, not your chakras. Faced with tears of joy, read one viral tweet with over 100,000 likes. When your peace and love meditation doesn't include people with different views, woman in lotus position prohibited, another popular post declared, accompanied by screenshots from her live stream. The local news stations had picked up the story, running headlines like "Social Media Influencers Attempt to Cancel Police Chief Backfires Spectacularly" and "Sunday in the Park with Mike, a Lesson in Prejudice and Patience." Jennifer's phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Messages from yoga students canceling their memberships, former followers expressing disappointment, and even a few death threats that she reported to the same police department she had tried to weaponize just yesterday. Meanwhile, across town at the police station, Chief Mike Thompson's morning briefing had taken on an unusual tone. Officers attempted to maintain their professional demeanor as social media clips played on various phones under desks. The chief's calm handling of the situation had turned him into an unexpected internet sensation, with several officers' body camera footage adding new angles to the viral story. "Chief," Officer Chin ventured during a break, "you're trending on TikTok. There's even a remix version with background music." The usually stoic chief allowed himself a small chuckle as he watched the video, where someone had set his interaction with Jennifer to the tune of, "Why can't we be friends?" Local businesses began taking sides in the digital aftermath. The coffee shop where Mike got his morning coffee put up a sign reading, "All hats welcome here," while several yoga studios across town offered judgment-free class specials in not-so-subtle digs at Jennifer's Mindful Moments studio. By Tuesday, national media outlets had picked up the story. A popular morning show ran a segment titled, "When Social Media Justice Goes Wrong," featuring clips from the incident and interviews with social media experts about the dangers of rushing to judgment in the digital age. Jennifer's phone rang. It was her business partner and friend, Sarah Chun, no relation to Officer Chin. "Jen, we need to talk about damage control." Sarah's voice was tense. "We've lost 30% of our monthly memberships since yesterday. The Veterans PTSD program participants are particularly upset. Apparently, many of them served with the chief in Afghanistan." Jennifer sank deeper into her office chair, her eyes fixed on the wall of certifications and peaceful mantras that now seemed to mock her. "I know, Sarah. I've spent all night reading the comments, watching the videos. God, I look horrible. Not just my actions. I was so sure I was right. So righteous. How did I become this person?" Outside her studio, a group of reporters had gathered, hoping to get a comment from the woman now known across the internet as the Liberty Park Karen. The irony of becoming exactly what she had accused others of being, an agent of intimidation and discomfort, was not lost on her. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Martinez, this is Chief Thompson. I meant what I said about the community dialogue session. Sometimes the best teaching moments come from our most difficult experiences. The door is still open. Mike." The message brought fresh tears to Jennifer's eyes. The chief's continuing grace in the face of her behavior made her public humiliation even more poignant. As the week progressed, the incident sparked broader discussions across social media platforms. Think pieces appeared with titles like "The Performative Activism Problem" and "When Wokeness Sleepwalks," the dangers of social media vigilantism. Jennifer's confrontation had become a case study in the pitfalls of snap judgments and the complex interplay between social media activism and real-world interactions. Local community forums were filled with debates about the incident. Some defended Jennifer's initial concern while criticizing her approach. Others shared similar stories of misjudging situations, and many praised Chief Thompson's handling of the confrontation as a masterclass in de-escalation and teaching moments. The viral spread had real-world consequences beyond just social media metrics. Jennifer's studio, once the crown jewel of Springfield's wellness community, saw its rating plummet across review platforms. 1 star, came for yoga, got a lesson in prejudice instead. Used to love this place until I saw the true colors of its owner. As a veteran, I'm disgusted. The chief has done more for PTSD awareness than this studio ever did. The comments stung, but they forced Jennifer to confront the gap between her professed values and her actions. Her morning meditation sessions, once filled with serene certainty about her role as a community activist, now brought uncomfortable questions about her own biases and assumptions. Digital marketing firms began using the incident in presentations about social media crisis management. Screenshots of Jennifer's livestream appeared in PowerPoint slides at corporate seminars about bias training. Her moment of public shame had become a learning tool for others, though that knowledge brought little comfort as she watched her business and reputation crumble. The local newspaper ran an in-depth profile of Chief Thompson, revealing his decades of community service, his support for various social programs, including Jennifer's Veterans Yoga Initiative, and his philosophy of building bridges rather than walls. The article included a photo of him in his dress uniform, decorated with medals from his military service, alongside a shot of him reading peacefully in the park, creating a stark contrast to Jennifer's characterization of him as a threat to community safety. By Friday, the video clips had been viewed over 50 million times across various platforms. Jennifer's attempt to shame someone on social media had instead become a viral lesson about the dangers of prejudice and the importance of looking beyond surface-level assumptions. The incident had transformed from a local park confrontation into a national conversation about social media activism, cancel culture, and the complex nature of true inclusivity. As Jennifer sat in her empty studio that Friday evening, watching the sunset through windows that usually framed bustling yoga classes, she received another text from Chief Thompson. The community dialogue session is tomorrow at 10 a.m. Sometimes the hardest poses to hold are the ones that matter most. Hope to see you there. Mike. She stared at the message for a long time, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she contemplated her response. The week's viral humiliation had stripped away her carefully constructed social media persona, leaving her face to face with the person she had become and the person she wanted to be. Saturday morning arrived with a gentle spring rain, as if nature itself was offering a clean slate. Jennifer Martinez stood outside the Springfield Police Department Community Center, her hand gripping her umbrella, so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The building's glass doors reflected her image. Gone were the designer yoga clothes and carefully curated aesthetic, replaced by a simple blouse and slacks. Even her signature crystal necklace was absent, a conscious choice to present her authentic self. Inside, the community dialogue session was about to begin. Chief Mike Thompson had arranged the room in a circle, deliberately breaking down the hierarchical barriers that often characterized such meetings. As Jennifer hesitated at the entrance, she could see familiar faces through the windows. Some of her former yoga students, several veterans from the PTSD program, local business owners, and even a few of the park regulars who had witnessed her viral moment of shame. Ms. Martinez, a warm voice called from behind her. She turned to find Chief Thompson, dressed in casual civilian clothes, holding the door open. "I'm glad you came." The room fell silent as Jennifer entered, dozens of eyes following her movement. She could feel the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, their expectations. The past week's viral humiliation had stripped away her carefully constructed public persona, leaving her feeling naked under their gazes. "Before we begin," Mike addressed the group, his voice carrying the same calm authority it had in the park, "I want to remind everyone why we're here. This isn't about shame or blame. It's about understanding, growth, and building real connections in our community." Jennifer found herself seated between Sarah Chun, her business partner, and James Rodriguez, one of the veterans who had been attending her studio's PTSD program. The irony of the arrangement wasn't lost on her. She was literally surrounded by the people she had claimed to be protecting and serving. "Let's start with a simple exercise," Mike suggested, removing his hat, the same red MAGA hat that had sparked the controversy, and placing it in the center of the circle. "I want each of us to share a story about a time we judged someone unfairly and what we learned from it." The stories began to flow. Officer Chen spoke about her prejudices when she first joined the force. A local business owner admitted to his biases against younger customers with tattoos. A veteran shared his struggles with judging civilians who had never served. Each story peeled back layers of human complexity, revealing the universal struggle with prejudice and assumption. When it was Jennifer's turn, she took a deep breath. The viral humiliation of the past week had taught her more than a decade of meditation, ever had about true self-awareness. "I built my entire brand around inclusivity," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "My Instagram bio literally says creating safe spaces for all. But what I realized this week is that my version of all had very specific parameters. I was so focused on appearing righteous that I became exactly what I claimed to be fighting against." The room remained silent, but the quality of the silence had changed. It was no longer heavy with judgment, but filled with recognition. The uncomfortable acknowledgement that Jennifer's mistake was a mirror reflecting their own potential for prejudice. Mike nodded encouragingly, and Jennifer continued, gaining strength in her vulnerability. "I saw the hat and immediately created a story in my head about who Chief Thompson was, what he believed, what threat he posed. I never once considered that the hat might mean something entirely different to him. I never asked. I never tried to understand. I just reacted." She turned to face Mike directly. "The hardest part isn't the viral shame or the business losses. It's realizing that I had become so convinced of my own righteousness that I lost the ability to see people as people. Complex, multifaceted human beings with their own stories, their own reasons, their own truth." As if on cue, Mike's phone buzzed, a message from his son James serving overseas. He shared the text with the group. "Dad, your viral fame reached us here in Afghanistan. The guys can't stop watching the video. Keep wearing that hat with pride. Love you." The human moment cut through the tension, drawing gentle laughter from the group. Jennifer found herself smiling for the first time in days, recognizing the beautiful irony of the situation. Her attempt to create conflict had instead opened a door to genuine understanding. The dialogue continued for hours, moving beyond the initial incident to deeper discussions about community, understanding, and the complex nature of true inclusivity. Veterans shared their experiences of feeling judged in civilian life. Police officers spoke about the challenges of maintaining composure in the face of prejudice. Young activists discussed their struggle to balance passion with wisdom. As the session drew to a close, Mike picked up his hat from the center of the circle. "This hat," he said, holding it up, "means different things to different people. But today, it brought us together in a way that might not have happened otherwise. Sometimes our greatest mistakes can lead to our most important growth." Jennifer nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Chief Thompson," she said, her voice steady despite her emotions, "I'd like to offer my studio for future community dialogue sessions. Not as a social media event, not as a publicity stunt, but as a genuine space for connection and understanding." The offer hung in the air for a moment before Mike smiled. "I think that's an excellent idea, Ms. Martinez. Real change happens in real spaces with real people having real conversations." As the group began to disperse, Jennifer checked her phone for the first time in hours. Her social media notifications had finally slowed, but a new hashtag was trending. #LibertyParkLearning, filled with stories of people sharing their own moments of prejudice and growth. Outside, the spring rain had cleared, leaving the air fresh and clean. Jennifer watched as Chief Thompson chatted with a group of veterans, his red hat back on his head. This time, she saw not a symbol of division, but a reminder of the complexity of human connection and the continuous work required to build true understanding. Sarah approached her, holding out a newly printed flyer for their studio. The tagline had been changed: "Mindful moments where every story matters." "It's a start," Jennifer said softly, taking in the simple words that now carried so much more meaning. Mike caught her eye across the parking lot and gave her a small nod. She nodded back, understanding passing between them. The viral moment that had nearly destroyed her had instead opened a door to genuine transformation. Not just for her, but for an entire community. As she walked to her car, Jennifer passed the local news crew that had been waiting outside. Instead of avoiding them as she had all week, she stopped. "Would you like to know what I learned?" she asked the reporter, who quickly raised his microphone. "I learned that true inclusivity isn't about performing acceptance on social media. It's about doing the hard work of examining our own prejudices, having difficult conversations, and being willing to grow from our mistakes." The story of the Liberty Park incident would continue to circulate online, but now with a new chapter. One about redemption, growth, and the complicated journey toward genuine understanding. Jennifer's yoga studio would slowly rebuild, not as a trendy wellness space, but as a true community center where difficult conversations could happen alongside downward dogs. And in Liberty Park on quiet Sunday afternoons, people would sometimes see Chief Thompson on his bench, reading his book, wearing his hat. A living reminder that every person has a story, if only we take the time to listen and understand. "Before you go, We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment that completely changed your perspective? Have you witnessed the power of understanding and forgiveness in your own community? Share your stories with us. And if this story of growth, redemption, and community healing resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Click that notification bell to stay updated with more powerful stories that remind us of our shared humanity and capacity for change.